talk about something else that is accrued to someone else's benefit. Stormy, what's her last name? Daniels. Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels. Now, so everybody knows this story, I believe, and there's more coming out, but Stormy Daniels is an adult film actress, and supposedly, I guess it was back in 2006? 2006? She allegedly had an ongoing affair with Donald Trump, which I know is sort of just gross to even have to articulate. But and the idea being, supposedly the reason why they're so worried about this being such a bombshell is that because Donald Trump was married at the time, and this is an illicit affair, and
how dare he? I am shocked.
Yeah, I'm shocked too. Like, she must be the only one he ever had an affair with. Maybe it was true love, and they were so compelled. But nevertheless, what has come out is that there was an interview that she gave back in 2011 before she signed an NDA, which apparently was signed in the waning weeks of the 2016 election. This is also strange. In the waning weeks of the 2016 election, like literally with weeks to go, she was paid $130,000 through a Delaware-based LLC, which is you incorporate or you form an LLC. I'm not sure if it was an S corp or an LLC, but nevertheless, you do this in Delaware because it affords you a lot more anonymity than doing it in some other state. Now, apparently, Trump's lawyer Cohen, not that bright, could have had a representative, didn't want to. So there's obviously pretty easy to trace it to him. But there's a couple of questions here, and I pose them to you, Digby. A, where did the money come from? B, what is it that she's getting paid for? Like, there's a 2011 interview out there detailing the fact that they had an affair. And so, I mean, presumably somebody knew this. This could have been dug up. What is it that she's actually being paid to keep quiet is a question. And here's another question for you. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at a list of what you've written the past week on Salon. And as I'm strolling through, you know, there's the who gave the money to the NRA to help Trump. We can talk about that because the NRA spent an enormous amount of money for them in this race, in a race that everybody presumed that Donald Trump was losing. And that's why you have to wonder, like, where did they get that money that they're willing to expend? But the next thing is sloppy Steve Bannon, now Trump's biggest problem. And it occurs to me, where did this story come from? And now that Steve Bannon is out in the outside, like, where did this story come from? So,
are we looking at
Stormy? Are we looking at Steve Bannon? I mean, is Steve Bannon doing this Stormy thing?
Well, I don't know. It's very interesting. I mean, the story broke in a Murdoch paper, right? I mean, it was in the Wall Street Journal. It was those reporters in the Wall Street Journal who dug up this news, these facts that showed that Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen had paid off Stormy Daniels in the days before the election in 2016. And then they dug up these details that you just outlined about the incorporating in Delaware, and he incorporated two different companies and then only ended up using one, and nobody really understands why, et cetera, et cetera. Very interesting. Now, you posed a question why he didn't find someone else, some kind of a cutout to do this, which would have made this very, very hard to trace who it was. My personal belief is because he didn't trust anybody. There was nobody they could trust with this information, which indicates to me that that what is being covered up and what the other question you posed, why would they do this? I mean, it was already out in the election, during the cycle that he had treated women like pigs and that he walked into the dressing rooms of the Miss USA pageant and, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this was not a porn star coming forward at the end of the, of the cycle. I don't know that
and saying I had an affair with Donald Trump.
I had an affair with Donald Trump 10 years ago. It's like everybody would have gone, yeah, well, what else is new, right? I mean, it just seems to me like that wouldn't have been something that would have required them to go to great lengths to try and cover that particular thing up when everything else that was out there was already out there, right?
Right.
So apparently a lot of news organizations had been working on this. They had, Fox News had the story, Slate had the story, there were a number of them who were out there, and obviously the Wall Street Journal. And they didn't go with it because she ended up not, she signed this non-disclosure agreement, took the money, we now know, and that was the end of that. But, as you point out, this story was already out there. In Touch had written about it in 2011. And, there was actually more to the story, which we've just found out last night, that Stormy Daniels had been she's from Louisiana, and she had, remember the David Vitter story, where he got caught by the D.C. madam, and we used to call him Diaper Dave, right?
Right.
He had been using, and he was a, nice right-wing Christian boy who'd been, wearing diapers and had been, this was his kink. And all of that was revealed. He was a senator from Louisiana. He's now a lobbyist, of course. Stormy Daniels decided she was going to run against him in Louisiana back then in 2006, and she started talking to a bunch of political people in Louisiana. She was pretty serious. She did a listening tour. She was going to be in politics, and in the course of that, she told other people about Donald Trump and the affair that they had, and gave some details about that affair that show that Donald Trump, he may not have been wearing diapers, but he was a little more kinky than anybody knew. In fact, she told one story that he liked to be spanked, and that he was wanted her to spank him with a copy of Forbes magazine that had his picture and pictures of his kids on the front.
Ooh.
And people went back and looked, and there was such a Forbes magazine that exists right in the time period.
We're looking at it right now. Not presumably the actual magazine that spanked his ass, but
right.
a facsimile of the cover.
Can I take a moment to gloat about how close I was yesterday in my guess?
Jamie had him pegged as spanky guy.
From adult baby incest play. So we'll see what else comes out.
Yeah, who knows what he needs to, to get him excited. He did tell Stormy Daniels that, she reminded him of his daughter.
Yes.
That was in the In Touch interview.
That's not.
In any case, setting aside, I can't help but
relationship
enjoy.
That you have with a woman. You always look to have a relationship with a woman who reminds you of your daughter. That's classic.
That's so normal. Well, you can't help but enjoy all this just on the purely, kind of sick and twisted side of another sick and twisted side of Donald Trump. But there's a bigger issue here, and I think it's really what makes this story something that goes beyond just, our own prurient interest. And that is the fact that Donald Trump has been, accused of potentially having been compromised by the Russian government. And that was in the Steele dossier. That was the big salacious detail about that he had been filmed with prostitutes when he was there in 2013 for the Miss Universe pageant.
Right.
And that's been the detail that he has denied most vociferously, right? I mean, he has been absolutely, I would never do it. And he said he wouldn't do that because he's a germaphobe. And everybody knows that a germaphobe would never do, some kind of humiliating, degrading, dirty thing like what is alleged in the Steele dossier. Well, what this story about Stormy Daniels does reveal, and there seems to be so much evidence that it actually happened that I'm going to go ahead and say it happened, is that Donald Trump was having sex with an adult film actress, and according to Stormy Daniels in the In Touch interview, he did not use protection. And that indicates to me that his excuse about being a germaphobe doesn't hold water, that at least when it comes to sex, Trump is not someone who is adverse to, exposing himself to germs. Let's put it that way. Stormy Daniels she performed in pornography and had many partners. So, and now we find out through this other story that's gotten out about her Louisiana Senate run that he had some kinky habits. this means that, I had never thought before that much about the golden shower story. I didn't care. But
I thought about it a lot.
Here we have Trump paying off a porno actress a week before the election, and now we know that he is one who was, involved in some sexual escapades that were kinky. So, it just lends credence to that story that wasn't there before.
I don't want to be a killjoy, but I just want to remind folks that the testing standards for people in the adult film community are actually quite high.
Oh, without a doubt. But
they are.
But a germaphobe, regardless of whether, a germaphobe, you would imagine would not be would have some reluctance to.
Absolutely. This is the guy who says he can only eat fish fillets because he knows that he won't be poisoned. Fillet of fish from McDonald's because he won't be poisoned. That's his excuse anyway. No, of course. Stormy Daniels, I'm sure she's perfectly healthy. It's just that someone like Trump, if he is this kind of germaphobe that he purports to be, that would be, in my view, that would be something he'd be concerned about.
I used to go over a lot of the health reports, and so I was fully aware of the fact that that in that industry that folks get checked out. So, but when did? He wasn't necessarily trying to hide anything because it would undercut a defense about the Steele dossier, because that hadn't come out really, had it? Had that come out? The P stuff had not come out prior to the election.
It had not come out, but he knew about it. They had. Remember, James Comey came and pulled him aside and told him, and they knew about it.
No, but that didn't happen until after he was elected. Comey didn't go to him until after he was elected. So, to pay off Stormy Daniels beforehand was not I can't get it out there that I'm not actually a germaphobe. It is, there had to be, whatever it was that she was going to tell had to be, important enough for him to drop that type of cash if it was his. In that last week or two. I'm surprised by that. I'm just surprised that, I don't know. There's something about it that just doesn't track, and I just don't know what it is. But, they all thought that he wasn't going to win. Maybe they thought, I got to pay another $120,000 to maintain within a 6-point, difference, or that, somehow. I just can't. There's something in there that just doesn't track, and that's what I'm finding so confusing about it. And I also, again, I wonder, is this the only? If they're in the habit of paying $130,000 to a adult film actress so that she doesn't talk, are we to believe that they didn't pay anybody else? And if
Bannon said they paid 100 women.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that I keep coming back to, look, Steve Bannon would have known about this, right? He is running the campaign at that point. He would have known about this. This would have been something that would have been not just brought to Trump, because Trump would have been like, whatever. He would have known about this. And the fact that he's on the outside and all of a sudden we know about this story, right, as opposed to some other story, just leads me to believe that there's something here that I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little bit too conspiratorial minded these days. But I just think that, look, Steve, the idea that Steve Bannon is not out there now every day, every waking moment, thinking about what he can do to screw over these people is hard for me to imagine.
You know it.
Right? Of course.
You know it.
And
I wrote that in the piece that I wrote about Sloppy Steve. He had this strange session with the House Intelligence Committee this week in which he allegedly claimed executive privilege, and then the White House says, no, we never told him that. We just told him to, be discreet, and it went back and forth. It's very complicated. But in the course of this thing where Bannon's in there for 10 hours and he's refusing to talk and had to subpoena him and all that, he let slip one little thing. And oops, the one little thing that he let slip was that he'd had a conversation with Spicer Priebus and Mark Carollo, who ended up quitting over the cover-up, he was the legal spokesman, that he had a conversation with them about the Trump Tower meeting. Oops. I mean, it's like one of those things where I said this in my piece for Salon, I'm going, what's the likelihood that he would, by mistake, drop a hint that he knows things about the central issue involved in the campaign committing collusion with the Russian government? Just that one little thing is the only thing. Oops, gosh, did I say that? So yeah, I think you're right. I think that Bannon may the whole tone of my piece was about, I'm going, why would you, here you have a guy who knows everything. You insult, and you find out that he's been loose-lipped with Michael Wolff. Instead of just saying, oh, the book is fiction, Steve Bannon didn't say that stuff, or whatever, or that's crazy Steve, he says crazy stuff all the time, and just let it go. Instead, calling him, saying he's lost his mind, and then getting him fired and losing his place in the movement that he helped create. A man with a lot of ammunition and nothing to lose is a very dangerous man.
Right, and that to me sounds like him signaling to them. I think you and I spoke about this on Ring of Fire. I think Bannon knows, like, hey, man, I'm not going in and telling that congressional committee anything because I know how much it gets back to the White House. I'll just wait until I get to Mueller so that nobody in the White House knows what I'm willing to say to Mueller. And on top of that, like, it's quite possible that this whole Stormy Daniels thing is also him basically signaling, like, hey, guys, don't forget, I know where all the bodies are buried. And,
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but it sure does make sense, doesn't it? Why now?
Why now? Why are we finding out about this now? Who's tipping off the Wall Street Journal? Like there was 10,000 LLCs filed that day in Delaware. Wow. And you don't just randomly come across these LLCs unless somebody has told you to look there. So somebody's telling them, right? They have a source on this. This is not, we just did some, just dug this up like, hey, maybe there was an LLC in Delaware filed, weeks before the election to keep somebody who had already done an interview, from talking. Like, they got a tip. And it's just, right now, you got to bet, like, if somebody had that tip, why wait a year to tell them about it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so I get a feeling that that's coming from Bannon. And and there's a reason why, that there's information there that they're probably sweating a little bit in the White House right now. And it's not just that, I don't think Melania is like, oh my God, Donald hasn't been faithful to me. Now maybe, I don't want to be a cynic, folks, but, and I would be equally surprised if she cared, frankly.
Yeah, me too. I was just going to say the same thing.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos